Hey, Rebel Rouser. I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your dose of Star Wars podcast joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So in the previous episode, I talked about how we had Star Wars Celebration Japan happening, and that there were 10 panels to particularly watch out for in terms of new news in the world of Star Wars storytelling. Well, Celebration Japan is over. It happened last weekend, and I'm here to recap the big news from those 10 panels I was talking about. The first one is the Mandalorian and Grogu panel that happened on Friday morning, but before they got into the Mandalorian and Grogu, there was a huge announcement. Star Wars Starfighter is the next movie that is being released in the Star Wars movie theater pantheon. It is Sean Levy's movie, and it is in fact going to star Ryan Gosling. We found out that it is taking place a few years after the events of The Rise of Skywalker. It's going to include and focus on all new characters. It's coming out in May of 2027, so the year of the 50th anniversary. It is leapfrogging the Rey movie, the Dawn of the Jedi movie, the Dave Filoni Mandoverse movie, and also the Taika Waititi movie and the Simon Kinberg trilogy were name-checked, but the Rian Johnson movie or series of movies was not mentioned. Neither was the Donald Glover Lando project either. So yeah, that's what we got so far. And for May of 2026, yes, The Mandalorian is still on track. Oh, by the way, Star Wars Starfighter is going to be shooting starting in the fall. So yeah, that's how it's jumped ahead of things. So The Mandalorian and Grogu, they had Pedro Pascal and Sigourney Weaver and Yoda, or Grogu, excuse me. What's wrong with me? Grogu show up along with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, and they showed footage at Japan from, some of it was from D23, but some of it was new stuff. We talked about the D23 footage last year in August when they showed it for folks showing up there. But yeah, some similar stuff and some new stuff as well. We know that Sigourney Weaver is some sort of member of the New Republic, that she is a pilot at some level because there was a photo of her in a New Republic pilot uniform. She also talked about how she hires the Mandalorian and Grogu. So in addition to being a pilot, she seems to be in some form of, position of authority, right? So that much we know, and we know a little bit about the Mando and Grogu getting hired out as contractors for the New Republic because that's how they position themselves at the end of season 3. So that's basically the big highlights from the Mandalorian and Grogu panel. The second panel I said we should keep an eye on was the Star Wars Manga Mania panel, and they did have some announcements there. So in addition to Vision Comics continuing and The Edge of Balance, which is the High Republic manga, that's continuing, there's going to be a 2-volume epic about the art of Star Wars, the manga adaptation from Dark Horse Comics back in the 90s. There's also going to be an adaptation via manga of Jedi Fallen Order and of at least one of the new Thrawn novels, probably all of them. And there's also a manga that's coming called Path of the Lightsaber, which takes place in between episodes 8 and 9, and it's going to follow a character who discovers a lightsaber on a mysterious asteroid, and hijinks naturally ensue. The third panel I mentioned was the Light and Magic panel. So they did talk about that, and it's not necessarily new news per se, but Joe Johnston is directing all of the episodes instead of Larry Kasdan, who directed all of season 1. Joe Johnston is known for having done a lot of concept artwork way back in the day in original trilogy days, and then he's also the director of, say, Captain America: The First Avenger, and I believe Jumanji and other movies too. So he's the one who's directing this season of Light and Magic, and they are getting into the digital revolution in movie making. So there's going to be a lot of stuff about the Phantom Menace, for example, in this season. The fourth panel was the Lucasfilm Publishing panel, Stories from a Galaxy Far, Far Away. And there were a lot of reveals of, artwork and covers for the comics that are happening. I think a lot of the novels are mostly new. There are a couple of reference books announced, like The Art of Andor, the complete series. There's not going to be a season 1 and a season 2. They showed the Trials of the Jedi wraparound cover by Charles Soule, which is the last adult novel in the High Republic Mega Ginormous Storytelling Initiative. They revealed the Crystal Crown, which is a Yord and Jecki novel, A Master Saul, will be appearing in it. It's a YA novel by Tessa Gratton and continues the storytelling of The Acolyte, although it's a prequel to the Acolyte series. There are some comics coming around, like the Battle of Eriadu one-shot and a Beacon one-shot that will be the end of Marvel High Republic storytelling. And let's see what else. A 50th anniversary book for Industrial Light and Magic that is coming in November of this year. The Andor book is coming in March of 2026. And I think, yeah, that pretty much covers the big news on the Lucasfilm Publishing side of things. And then the fifth panel was the last of the panels on Friday that I was flagging for your attention, and it was the Lucasfilm Animation 20th Anniversary panel. And I did suggest that they were going to do something, and they did. They did a couple of big somethings. First of all, they previewed the first episode of Tales of the Underworld. It's an Asajj Ventress story, so that's very cool for the folks who were there. Then it's coming on May the 4th to Disney+. But the even bigger news is that there is going to be a new Star Wars animated series called Maul Shadow Lord, and it is detailing Maul, not Darth Maul anymore, but Maul's efforts to rebuild his criminal enterprise after the events of the Clone Wars. And so also then particularly after the events of season 7 of the Clone Wars, when we saw him captured and being remanded into custody. So that is very exciting news too. Sam Witwer is returning to be the voice of Maul, as he should. They've got Merrick, the Inquisitor that we saw in the Ahsoka series, is going to be appearing in this. Rook Kast, the Mandalorian who had been allied with Maul, is going to be a part of this series too. Yeah, it's going to be pretty fascinating, and it is coming in 2026. Now, moving on to Saturday, there were 3 panels that I called out for your attention last week. One of them was the Andor Season 2 panel, which the folks at Celebration Japan got to see the first episode, which was, again, very cool for them. And yeah, it's not much longer for the rest of us now. I know that there are people who have gotten to see Andor Season 2 in its entirety for reviews and whatnot, and the feedback seems to be incredibly positive, which is almost not a surprise, but also quite a relief as well. So that happened. The second of the day on Saturday was the Ahsoka panel, where they announced that it is going to be filming like any day now. They said next week when they were there in Japan. So next week could be this week, or it could be, the week after that. But that's certainly a lot quicker than we had heard previously in Natasha Liu Bardizzo's comments at a comic convention last year. That's very cool. Dave Filoni also dropped an interesting line about the father and the son and most of the daughter being present on Peridia. So I think we're going to have to dive into the meaning of that comment. But he also said that the character Baylan Skoll is supposed to be a dark parallel to Ahsoka. And Ahsoka in the Clone Wars series nearly died, but then was revived with the essence of this Mortis god, the daughter. And so in that case, then you would think of Baylan Skoll as the son equivalent in the Mortis gods. And who would be the father except perhaps Anakin Skywalker, the ghost of Anakin Skywalker, who showed up at the end of season 1 of the Ahsoka series and who is supposed to be representing balance in the Force, which is exactly what the father of the Mortis gods was supposed to do. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe I guess it took care of that podcast episode already with just that. So, yeah, we don't have any, news or photography necessarily. They showed images of Rory McCann as the replacement for the late Ray Stevenson as Baylan Skoll, and yeah, everyone is saying wonderful things about Rory, which is terrific, and it is such a shame because Ray Stevenson was a powerhouse, but it seems like we are moving forward in the best way that we possibly can. And the third of the 3 on Saturday, which would be the 8th panel I was asking you to keep an eye out for overall, was the Star Wars video game panel. So mostly it was about this game Zero Company that was officially announced just before Celebration itself, but they dove into it much more deeply at Celebration. But it wasn't the only video game news that came out of Celebration. There's also going to be a multi-week long Fortnite event that's going to culminate in an in-game narrative situation. I don't know if this is official storytelling per se, because they're also going to have Darth Jar Jar in this thing, so we'll see. But it is interesting that they are promoting an in-game narrative event. And then there's going to be another story mode or another story DLC chapter added to Star Wars Outlaws, and that is called A Pirate's Fortune. And yes, Hondo Ohnaka is going to be a part of that chaos. But swinging back to Zero Company, so this is going to be a game featuring a group of professionals that are hired on to do impossible jobs. They are fighting the war beneath the war that's happening with ciphers and sabotage and surveillance. The main leader of Zero Company, Hawks, is somebody who was previously a captain in the Grand Army of the Republic, but he's not a clone, which is kind of interesting. So we have a little bit to learn about his backstory. And there are other characters, including an Umbaran, a Mandalorian, a Togruta, and a clone who are members of Zero Company that can be substituted in at will to complete missions that you might end up doing while you're playing the game. Their base of operations is in the Ring of Kafrane, which we saw at the beginning of Rogue One, and supposedly it has one of the most expansive maps of any Star Wars game we've yet seen. They will be going to worlds that have appeared in other Star Wars storytelling, so that's very exciting too. And then on Sunday, there were two more panels to flag for your attention. One of them was the panel about Star Wars Visions Volume 3, and we found out that of the 9 new shorts that we're getting, 3 of them are actually sequels to shorts that happened in Volume 1. So The Duel, The Village Bride, and The Ninth Jedi are all getting second storytelling shorts in this series, in addition to 6 new shorts that are happening. And they also announced that there's going to be an ongoing Star Wars Visions Presents series that expands the storytelling world of The Ninth Jedi. They also said we can look for Star Wars Visions Volume 3 to arrive on October 29th of this year, and that we can see that Ninth Jedi series coming in 2026. And the last panel I said to keep an eye on was the closing ceremonies, not necessarily for any storytelling reveals, but for the fact that they would probably tell us when the next Star Wars celebration would be happening. And they did. It is going to be at the Los Angeles Convention Center in 2027, April 1st through 4th of 2027. They said, I believe it's the first time that it will be in Los Angeles since 2006 or so. So yeah, that's where the 50th anniversary year celebration event is happening, and it is bound to be a wild one. So there you go, a quick rundown of all the news that was fit to print in Star Wars Celebration Japan's panels, and that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.